Sketching space in urban sketching. Let's go.
Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise.
Sorry if you're a Star Trek fan. No Star Trek today. We're going to talk about the element of space for this video. So if you have not seen the video on the 7th element of urban sketching, please go watch that video and then you can come back. I have 3 thoughts for you when it comes to the element of space. Well, space essentially is about creating distance, making your sketch looks a bit more three-dimensional, that there's a bit of a depth to your sketch. And there are 3 ways that I think about this. The 3 things are layers, stacks or stacking, and negative or negative shapes. So in layering, what you're trying to think is the different planes or different distance. The first one, of course, is foreground. The second one is the midground or the middle distance, and usually in a 3-plane sketch, you have a background. And this is how you should be thinking about your sketch when you're sketching space. To create that distance, you think in foreground, midground, and background. But what if you want to sketch something that's like this, just 2 planes or 2 layers? It's possible too. Well, you think about it, there's only foreground and background. The sketch will work even if you choose a 2 planes or 3 planes or 2 layers or 3 layers. It doesn't really matter. The more layers you put in, of course, the more complicated your sketch becomes. So that is about layering or designing the planes in your sketch. Next is the idea of stacking. Well, stacking means you have to look at objects and how they stacked on one another on a 2-dimensional piece of paper. If you see this picture, you see the boats, the 2 boats in front, they are actually stacked on one another. In other words, the shape of the first boat in front is on top of the shape of the boats right behind it. When you're sketching a scene, of course, you isolate the objects of your sketch. Imagine you're sketching these 2 boats. You want to make sure that you overlap them, and it gives you a sense of distance and depth in your sketch. And this is what I mean by stacking, that you are conscious about the shapes that you're putting down on your sketchbook, and you are overlapping them on purpose to give you a sense of distance and space. The next example for stacking is a little bit more complicated. Imagine you are sketching this complicated scene of lots of cars in the traffic, and you're trying to create this depth or distance, and you use the stacking technique to stack the shapes of the cars so that you can create this feel or space in your sketch. What I want you to note is that even as you isolate the first few cars in the long rows of cars receding into the back, they actually reduce in size, and they actually reduce in size quite dramatically. You need to observe how much it reduces in size. The size does matter because it gives you a sense of how far the car at the backs are compared to the car in front. Just remember, everything at the back is relative to this car, the first car, and the sense the audience will get when they look at your sketch will all be about how they compare to the first car and the size of it, basically. You don't want to sketch something that is illogical to the mind of your audience. For example, a tomato in front is much smaller than a tomato at the back. In reality, that may be the case, but it will be very hard to read a sketch like this because it is not normal to see a bigger tomato at the back. When everything is in line, you assume that receding tomatoes will be smaller in size. So that's my thought around the stacking of shapes in your ability to draw space or distance. Stacking is actually one of the most critical or important technique you can employ to create this sense of distance and space. Finally, the idea of negative space or negative shapes. It's a little bit more abstract. I'll try my best to explain it. It's actually not that hard once you kind of understand what it's all about. So let me try to explain this. You can see this picture where you can see the two faces squaring off with each other, and it's easy to see. But if I put it in another way, you will see also the glass, the outline of the glass. And in some ways, your mind is set out to see things actually the opposites or the negative of a shape. Okay, let's talk about an example where you're looking at a person and you're trying to understand the negative shape of this sketch. Now that I take away the background and I put an orange background to make the orange background the negative shape. Well, it's negative because the positive shape consists of the person and the teapot, but the background is the negative shape. So in urban sketching, it is very important to learn to see the negative shape in your sketching so that you can isolate parts and you can start create planes and you can create layers and so on and so forth. It's also possible to do sketches like this, little vignettes where you're looking at things negatively. One of the easiest way in a digital form is actually you put a blob of black ink, if you like, and then erase out the positive shape. What's left is the negative shape. So how does negative shape help with creating space? Well, you want to create isolation of planes, and one of the best ways is to train your eyes to see negatively around the edges, around the hair, around the shape of the main object you're doing. And by doing so, you begin to see the different planes of your sketch. And when you're able to design the foreground, midground, background, or sometimes you just use two planes, foreground and background, you'll be able to create the space or depth for your sketches. So I hope that helps, in thinking about the space element in urban sketching. I hope as well you start to think in layers, in stacking of shapes, and basically thinking negatively or negative shapes in all your sketches. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed that. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Young ones